we are just doing a demo for 5G.
Okay.
And then the demo is on the use cases for 5G.
Yes.
So the main use case for 5G is something called network slicing.
So, and for my viewers here, this is Ericsson's booth. They are here at Safaricom East Africa Decode event. And so tell us about 5G and what you guys are doing about it.
So we are doing a demo on a user case for 5G.
Yes.
Which is we're mainly demonstrating about network slicing.
Okay.
What is network slicing?
Yes.
Is we provide you with the capability of sort of like subdividing your network.
Yes.
Depending on the demand.
Yes.
And depending on specific subscriptions.
Okay, okay.
So like if I am interested in an event, I'm running an event, and we are expecting the traffic to maybe spike.
Yes.
In terms of the demand for the network resources.
Yes.
Then we can actually subdivide that network into sort of like slices.
Yes.
So smaller networks, so smaller sub networks, so to speak.
Yes.
And those smaller sub networks, you will the end users or the subscribers will have access based on the subscription they've done.
Yes, yes.
So for example, if I come here and then I do subscribe.
Yes.
So you see, like this is just an example.
Yes, yes.
You can see that we have free, we have premium, and then we have somebody who is paying for $2.
So, and this is an example using football.
Yeah, we are just the example using a football match.
Yes, yes.
So the person who is watching it for free,
Yes.
might experience some buffering.
Yes.
Because everybody's trying to access at the same time.
Yes, yes, yes.
And then there's this other person who is watching it for premium. Yeah. So then this person who is watching it for, when I select the person who is watching it for premium, then I come here and subscribe.
Yes.
I'll select that, then I'll go back and I'll go live.
Yes.
So when I go live for the person who is watching it for premium,
Yes.
you can see here under the premium subscriptions, besides watching the football match,
Yes.
you also get access to other cameras. Like I can decide, let me see what is happening at the bench. Yeah?
Yes, yes.
Let me see what is happening at the goalkeeper.
Yes.
Let me see what is happening at the corner. Yeah, you see, so that is some of the services you get with the premium subscription. And again, another thing with the premium subscription, you sort of like have a dedicated pipe for you, so you don't suffer from the
buffering and all that.
So you get more or less better service.
Yes.
And it can be look at it like, for example, when there's a high demand, look at a football match,
Yes.
a Formula One race.
Yes.
So then you'll be expecting that there'll be a lot of demand at that specific point in time. So the subscription can also be just be for that specific time, or it can also be based on maybe a certain set period.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So for 5G, I know there is the problem of it being a short wavelength kind of thing. So where if 4G was covering like a large area, and 5G now needs more like servers and all those kind of equipment to cover a bigger area. So what is with the challenges of what do you call it? With the challenges of infrastructure in Africa, how are you guys covering that? You know.
So first of all, 5G, you have to look at it in two ways.
Yes.
There is the introductory version of 5G,
Yes.
which is called the non-standalone.
Yes, yes.
The non-standalone 5G leverages on 4G, which means it works together with 4G.
Yes.
So what that means is that where the 4G cell coverage is,
Yes.
you introduce a 5G cell. Then in that kind of a scenario, is that the control is actually on the 4G, non-standalone. And the non-standalone, it means that we also do not have a dedicated core network, 5G core.
Okay.
We do not have a dedicated core network. Then there is now the advanced version of the 5G,
Yes.
which is actually what is the 5G,
Yes.
which is now the 5G standalone. So that is where I think that is the one you are referencing to, because that one is now 5G standalone. So then it means you have to have so many cell sites to cover, and even for indoor, maybe you also have to have some indoor coverage. And just like you said, that of course, because of and the reason is very simple.
Yes.
In physics, we have the equation that represents. You have the speed of light,
Yes.
the wavelength,
Yes.
and then there's a constant.
Yes, yes.
So then the wavelength is what enables the sort of like the coverage. But the wavelength is inversely proportional to the speed of light. So as the wavelength becomes higher, there's also the aspect about the frequency. So as the wavelength becomes higher, as the frequency becomes higher, then the wavelength becomes lower. So 5G initially was operating in the mid-band range.
Yes, yes, yes.
So we'll talk about 2.6 megahertz, 3.5 gigahertz for the mid-band, okay? And then, of course, for the high bands, we're talking about 28 gigahertz or above. Right? So now, of course, that affects what? Affects the wavelength. And then if it affects the wavelength, that determines how far it can cover. But now in 5G, especially for Africa and maybe even where 5G is not really developed, we are doing 5G even at 700 megahertz. What is 700 megahertz? 700 megahertz is a frequency that was vacated by the TV signal. You remember we migrated
before now.
Yeah. Yes. Before it was by the TV signals, but we migrated to digital, so it freed that 700 megahertz. So the frequency 700 compared to 3,500. So 700 is 0.7 meg. Okay. 3,500 is 0.3. Okay, rather it's 700 megahertz is 0.7 gig. Okay. 3,500 is 3.5 gig. So you see, the 700 megahertz will have a bigger wavelength, so it will penetrate more. So we are able to cover wider areas. So where we are introducing 5G for the first time, we are encouraging. There are other methods that we use, but mainly on the 700, on the 900, and sometimes even on the 2100. So then that way, of course, as the lower frequencies gives you better penetration. But then there's also the advantage. There's also it's normally a give and take kind of a scenario. So here you'll have lower throughputs because the bandwidth is also not big, because there's so many people demanding that. But then when you move on the higher spectrum, then you have less penetration, but bigger bandwidth, which means better throughput. So it's about a give and take. Any scenario.
So last question is, there are like the normal use cases of 5G that are known by everyone.
Yeah, which one do you know?
So for one,
let me pose the question back.
The network, networking and all those kind of things. And another one is, like as you said here, for
network slicing.
Network slicing and all that kind of things. But what are some niche ones that most people don't know about and like they should
I'll talk about things like critical IoT. What is critical IoT?
Information of things,
Critical IoT is a critical Internet of Things. What is critical Internet of Things? When I'm talking about when we go into medicine, when you go into the autonomous cars, the driverless cars, we're really very much looking at the latency. So we must ensure that we are having that ultra reliable, low latency. Okay, so then that we are able to achieve with 5G, because 5G provides us a very low latency. You do not want to be having a driverless car which is approaching the traffic lights, but because of the high latency, it only gets the signal after it has gone. So you see, that is one user case. In industry, you're also talking about, when you talk about Industry 4.0, what is Industry 4.0? Industry 4.0 is where now you are within the factories, you are doing automation, and you're introducing, like in the mining industry, for example, you're introducing robotics. So then you do not want the robot has already gone past where you expected it for it to be giving you feedback to take some action. You want it to be received almost instantaneously, like real time. So those are some. The user cases for 5G are actually diverse. Connecting onto the internet is very minimum. It is a use case, but there are many. Like when you talk about automation, and even when I talk about critical IoT, even in medicine, that is another example. So we are talking about industry in terms of automation. We are talking about even about those autonomous cars. Yeah. So those are some of the use cases. So and when you talk about even the network slicing. An operator like Safaricom can decide to do a network slice for an industry like, let me say, give an example, a big industry in Kenya. Like let's say a manufacturing industry, let me say that handles steel. So then they give them that specific network slice and they call it that name of the industry. So it is part of the bigger Safaricom network, but it is not hampered
by
other users, because them they have that dedicated. Yeah, they have that dedicated. And even when you as an end user who is not part of that industry cannot even see that network because it's the way it has been configured. So it will be more or less be dedicated. Specific users who are known, they are allocated. So that is part of the. 5G user cases are infinite. They are infinite.
So thank you for your time.
No worries.
Okay,
karibu.